Next up, we have sharp force injuries, which includes incision by a light cutting weapon and chop by a heavy cutting weapon. So incision is a sharp force injury. It's a sharp force injury due to a light cutting weapon like a knife or a scalpel. Morphology. Morphologically, it has a regular margin. Unlike laceration, which has irregular margin, incision has a regular margin. So there's a regular margin. And the blood vessel, instead of being crushed like in case of laceration, it is cut. Since the blood vessel is cut, there is more bleeding because the blood has more space to gush out. As for types, the types are on the basis of manner of incision. Manner of incision. If the incision was put by someone else with the intention to harm you, then that is homicidal incision. If the incision is put by yourself with the intention to harm yourself, that is suicidal incision. And if the incisions are there because you protected yourself against a homicidal attack, that is defense incision, also referred to as homicidal cuts, suicidal cuts and defense cuts. First, homicidal cuts. They are also referred to as beveled cuts morphologically, because here the cut is beveled or at an angle. You can see that the cut is at an angle. And this angle made by the cut with the sharp weapon is hidden under the tissue. It's kind of hidden under the tissue like this. So it's hidden under the tissue. This is referred to as undermining edge. Undermining edge. See what is happening. Here the sharp weapon is used, the sharp weapon brings about an incision at an angle, and this incision is hidden under a tissue, flap of tissue. This is referred to as undermining edge. Here the cut is single and deep. It is deep because the intention is to harm you. The intention is to end your life in a single slash, in a single blow. So that's your homicidal cut. See, whenever someone tries to strike you with a sharp weapon, they are going to strike you at an angle, right? And that is why you get incision at an angle. And an incision at an angle is referred to as beveled cut. And whenever there is a beveled cut, the cut is hidden under a tent of tissue, and this is referred to as undermining edge. Usually it's a single strong deep slash because someone is trying to finish you off. Next, suicidal cuts. These are also referred to as hesitational cuts. These are most commonly seen over the wrist, where you are trying to end your own life by cutting your wrist. And when you cut your wrist, when you try to cut your wrist, you don't cut it at an angle. You don't slice it at an angle. You slice it at a straight line, in a straight line. And obviously, at first attempts, you are hesitating. So you are hesitantly cutting. Since you are hesitantly cutting, there are going to be multiple incisions. And finally, there's going to be one single cut which is deep enough to finally kill you. That is why it is also referred to as hesitational cuts, because you hesitate to cut yourself, so there are multiple cuts. These are also referred to as tentative cuts, because first there are cuts that are tentative and finally a final cut. Or intentional cut, because you are intentionally cutting yourself, intentional cut. Or trial cuts, because there are multiple trials that take place, right? Trial cuts. See, overall there are multiple and superficial. They are multiple and superficial, and they are present at accessible part, like your wrist. It's an accessible part. You can easily cut there. You can see that this person has also resulted in multiple attempts, hesitational cuts, trial cuts, and finally there was one deep cut. Then there are defense cuts. The defense cuts, they are of two types. Either you have active defense cuts or passive defense cuts. Here, someone is trying to strike you and you are protecting yourself or defending yourself. Either you can protect or defend yourself actively by directly grabbing the weapon, or you can protect yourself passively by blocking the strike of the weapon. When you actively see, either you actively grab the weapon or you block the weapon. When you actively grab the weapon, the sharp edge of the weapon, where does it go and cut? It will go and cut in the first wave space of your palm. It will go and cut in the first wave space of your palm. So it's seen in the first wave space. In passive, when you try to block, where are the cuts going to be? The cuts are going to be over the fingers, over the palm, or over the ulnar border of the hand. Obviously, you are not going to protect yourself like with the radial border. It's going to be with the ulnar border, right? When you're protecting yourself, the ulnar border is facing the perpetrator, the attacker. So the ulnar margin, palm and fingers. Okay. So I showed you morphology from the side. What about morphology from the top? So from the top, an incision looks spindle shaped with the tail at the end. Okay, it looks spindle shaped with the tail at the end. So in case of laceration, there was shallow tailing. In case of incision, in case of laceration, there was shallow tail. In case of incision, there is tailing. So this is the head and this is the tail. At head, more force is applied, so there is more depth. At tail, there is less force, so there is less depth. And the tailing also gives you the direction of force, which is along the direction of tailing. So it is really easy to understand. If I put an incision over my palm like this, over my hand like this, okay, incision over my hand. First, I'm going to put a lot of force into the incision. Then as it cuts through the skin, finally I'm going to lift my arm and the weapon is going to get lifted. As the weapon is going to get lifted, the depth of the incision decreases. First, high application of high force, large depth. Then as you incise, then the weapon is lifted up, the depth decreases, the force decreases, the depth also decreases, and tailing occurs. That is why the direction of the force is also from head to tail, from more depth to less depth, from the start to the tailing. You can appreciate the following dimensions. You can appreciate the length, you can appreciate the breadth, and you can also appreciate the depth. So length times breadth times depth. What you need to remember is that the breadth of the cut is usually more than the thickness of the weapon itself. That is because of gaping. Due to the collagen fibers over the skin, it pulls the wound apart and gaping takes place. That is why the spindle shaped wound and breadth more than the breadth of the wound itself more than the thickness of the weapon. Okay. Up next, very important topic. Difference between laceration and incision. See, this is laceration with irregular margin, with bruising at the edge, and crust base. The base is crust base. Since the base is crust, the blood vessel is crust and there is less bleeding, and tissue bridges. So there are four things. First, the margin is irregular. Second, the edge shows bruising. Third, the base is crust, so there is less bleeding. And fourth, there are tissue bridges. However, in case of an incision, the margin is regular margin, there is no bruising at the edge, no bruising at the edge, and then the base, instead of being crushed, it is cut, so there is more bleeding. Cut base, so there is more bleeding, and there are no tissue breaches. The tissue breaches are not there, no tissue breaches. So these are the 4 differences between laceration and incision. Next, difference between incised looking laceration and laceration looking incision. Okay, so incised looking laceration is also referred to as split laceration. How does split laceration takes place? Split laceration takes place when a soft tissue is crushed between 2 hard objects, where one of the hard object is the striking hard object and the other hard object is the hard structure of the own body underneath. This is the hard body structure underneath the soft tissue. For example, in this case, it's the skull and the soft tissue itself is the scalp. So the scalp gets crushed in between the striking hard object and the skull underneath. It is sandwiched and then crushed. As it gets crushed, it splits. Splitting takes place, and that is why it is referred to as split laceration. But with naked eye, when you see, you can see a regular margin. Now the thing is, laceration has irregular margin, incision has a regular margin. That means, is this an incision? No, because the injury is as a result of a blunt force. So it is laceration. But then the margin seems to be regular to naked eye. But when you actually go ahead and use a hand lens, you can actually appreciate the irregular margin. You can appreciate the crust base. You can appreciate the tissue breaches, which are characteristic of laceration. And that is why this is referred to as incised looking laceration, because to naked eye it looks like an incision, but when you actually go ahead and use a hand lens, you can appreciate the characters of laceration. Then you have laceration looking incision. Very easy. Laceration looking incision is actually sharp force injury. There is sharp force injury, I repeat, but then it looks like laceration to the naked eye. This can either be due to serrated knife, which has, see, this is a serrated knife, or it could be due to incision at axilla, groin, etc. At these regions, due to the skin itself, the skin texture itself, the incision looks like a laceration. With that, we are done with incision as well. Let's revise once. So what is incision? It is a sharp force injury due to light cutting weapon. Morphologically, it has a regular margin and the blood vessel is cut instead of crushed, so there is more bleeding. When you look from top, you can look at the spindle-shaped cut with tailing. The direction of force is in the direction of the tailing. And the types of incision are on the basis of manner of incision, either homicidal cuts, which are beveled cuts, that is cuts at an angle, which gives off a tent of tissue which covered the cut under it, also referred to as undermining edge. Then suicidal cuts, which are also referred to as hesitational cuts, where the person cuts himself, especially over the wrist, and there are multiple attempts at cutting himself. Then defense cuts, which can either be active, where the person tries to grab the weapon itself, as a result there is cut at the first wave space, or passive defense cut, where the person tries to block the attack, so there is cut at the level of palm, fingers and ulnar margin. Laceration versus incision, look at the margin, look at the edge, look at tissue breach, look at the base. Incised looking laceration is nothing but split laceration, and laceration looking incision is nothing but incision due to serrated knife or incision at axilla groin.